G7 summit wrapped up this week. Greer, who represents the U.S. trade negotiations for CUSMA and USMCA, met with LeBlanc of Canada, our negotiator. Let's see what happened. So on the sidelines in France this week, Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer had their face-to-face first-time meeting since October 2025. I don't think so. Has that been that long? With 11 days till July 1st, this is the last scheduled high-level contact before the CUSMA review. Here's what came out of it, and what's every manufacturer in Canada needs to know. I'm Jack Jackson. I owned a 34-year-old manufacturing company for 17 years. Let's cut through the diplomatic language. So Canada's position on G7 meeting was clear. LeBlanc wants a 16-year renewal. Sent a letter to Greer, Mexico's economic minister, and on June 2nd, formally requesting that renewal. He proposed a bilateral agreement meeting and to sit alongside the trilateral framework. Carney said last week there has been progress since June 2nd Washington meeting, and LeBlanc called himself eternally optimistic. Both are diplomatic non-answers. Word salad, as a lot of people say, right? To tell you that negotiations are alive, but nothing is close to being resolved. So, what the U.S. wants. Well, Greer said consistently the U.S. is unlikely to renew for 16 years. Annual reviews are the U.S. preference. Specific bilateral side deals on automotive content, dairy, forced labor, and digital services is what U.S. is pushing. Yeah. And Greer said that he'd be open to two separate bilaterals, one for Canada, one for Mexico, sitting alongside the trilateral CUSMA framework. That's a structural shift to the trilateral CUSMA, USMCA, and TMAC agreement that's currently in place. Well, what that all means to us, there's just so much uncertainty, and you know, how much money can you invest when you don't know the rules, and you're trying to figure out, like with our client, what's the rule today and what was the rule a couple months ago and then 6 months ago and a year ago, and the tariffs, looking back, and the surcharges and the duties, and when you dig into it, importing or exporting, I mean, it's a lot of work to figure out what the rules are, but then the rules could change any day. So, U.S. Ambassador Peter Hoekstra told a Toronto audience this last week that when Trump says the U.S. doesn't need anything from Canada, he's actually looking for ways to collaborate. So that's a diplomatic translation for Canada needs to put something on the table. LeBlanc said that they made progress on a number of issues, and that the U.S. has raised with Canada over the several months, and he described the talks as not just a one-way conversation. Political talk again. Not sure what that means. Nothing's concrete. Canada's U.S. Ambassador Mark Wiseman told a Toronto business crowd last week to take a deep breath and relax. It's all going to be okay. Oh, thank you. And he confirmed that the U.S. if the U.S. doesn't renew on July 1st, CUSMA stays in place until 2036 unless someone gives 6 months notice. Someone gives 6 months. Oh, we're okay until 10 years from now, but maybe in 6 months we won't be. How do you plan? Anyways, no formal bilateral ground for Canada is announced at all. No data set up. U.S.-Mexico round 3 is still July 20th. Mexico City and Canada has no planned meetings whatsoever. So, the diplomatic calendar after the G7, when everybody got together and everybody was supposed to talk, is there is no diplomatic calendar to follow. Canada was there with all the representatives. Carney and Trump were there. Nobody talked. Nobody set anything up. And the reality of the reality check is that we just got to keep watching and thinking. And I know when I own the company, there's no way going back that I could even think about being in business still today. And I was fortunate enough to go to the U.S. and ask the manufacturers to manufacture my systems and I'm selling. So I tell you, if I had to live through this every week, trying to figure out what my stuff's going to cost to come into Canada and what my stuff's going to cost to get out to the U.S., it would be a many sleepless nights. So next week's final stretch, July 1st, is around the corner. I'll be covering every development as it breaks as much as I can. And if you're a Canadian manufacturer with U.S. sales and you're not sure where your compliance stands, please book me for a 30-minute consultation. Also, if you're importing, as we're finding a lot, like we used to do as well, we had imports. They're getting stung left, right, and center with charges you may not even realize when you look at your invoice from your broker, and that's even more confusing. So we're working on both. I'm Jack Jackson. This is Manufacturer Daily. Please like, subscribe, pass this on to anybody you know, or give me a call for a 30-minute discussion. Thanks so much for listening. Have a nice day.